The galaxy had always ignored Earth. To the great empires of the stars, humanity was nothing more than a backwater species, primitive, scattered, irrelevant. They had no great fleets, no sprawling colonies, no influence in the grand game of galactic politics. For centuries, the Zorzan Dominion and the Vorlian Collective had waged a brutal war, their battles carving scars into the void of space. Their conflict spanned entire sectors, their fleets annihilating planets as they fought for dominance. And in all this time, humanity was never even considered a factor. But on this day, as both empires prepared for their next great battle, something appeared in the darkness of space. Something no one had ever seen before. An impossible warship. It came without warning. A massive, silent behemoth emerged from the void, black as the abyss, outlined only by eerie blue energy veins pulsing along its hull. It bore no insignia, no markings of allegiance, no name to identify its purpose. It was as if it had been carved from the darkness itself. The Zorzan fleet immediately locked onto the vessel, their scanners running over its structure. But the moment they did, their systems crashed, data scrambled, processors fried. Every attempt to analyze the ship resulted in dead silence. The Vorlian Collective, operating on a hive mind network, felt something for the first time in their history. Dread. This ship wasn't just advanced. It was something entirely unknown. The battlefield, once filled with the thunder of war, fell into absolute silence. Then, a single transmission cut through the emptiness of space. The warning. A deep, distorted voice echoed across every frequency, in every known language. You have trespassed into human space. Leave now, or face extinction. The Zorzan warlord aboard the command ship let out a guttural laugh. Human space? Humanity had no fleets. No military worth mentioning. No planetary defenses beyond a few scattered colonies. What was this nonsense? This is Supreme Commander Orcs of the Zorzan Dominion. Your vessel is unregistered. Identify yourself and your purpose. Silence. Then, a single movement. The warship tilted slightly, as if turning to look directly at him. Every Zorzan officer on the bridge felt a chill crawl up their spines. And then, it began to move. Not with the sluggish weight of a battleship. Not with the conventional propulsion of known spacecraft. It simply shifted. No heat signature. No thrusters. No hyperspace wake. It defied physics. Vorix's command ship locked weapons. If this vessel wouldn't answer, it would be destroyed. He had no idea that, in this moment, he had just signed his own death sentence. The fatal decision. Commander Orcs did not hesitate. He was Zorzan, a warrior born, trained to dominate, to crush any species that stood in the way of his empire. And yet, something about the void-black human warship made his instincts scream. His claws tightened around the command console as he gave the order. Fire. Destroy it. The Zorzan fleet responded instantly. A barrage of high-energy plasma torpedoes, railgun slugs, and antimatter warheads streaked toward the human ship. Hundreds of projectiles, enough firepower to shatter a moon, all converged on the silent vessel. And then, they simply vanished. The bridge of the Zorzan flagship fell into stunned silence. Not a single explosion. Not a single impact. Just emptiness. Vorix's second-in-command whispered the only thing that came to mind. Where did they go? The impossible movement. Without a sound, without a trace, the human warship shifted again, not by propulsion, not by inertia. It moved as if space itself bent around it. And then, it was right in front of them. One moment, it was kilometers away. The next, it was hovering mere meters from Vorix's command ship, its massive, looming presence casting a shadow over the bridge. A slow, eerie hum vibrated through every Zorzan vessel. Not a weapon was fired. And yet, every warrior on board felt something they had never known before. Terror. The Vorlian hive panics. In the vast expanse of space, the Vorlian collective had remained still, watching, calculating. As an insectoid hive mind, they did not act on emotion. They acted on patterns, predictions, probability. But this ship, it defied logic. Alert. Alert. Unknown vessel exhibits non-Euclidean maneuvering. Probability of survival, 3%. Probability of understanding, 0%. For the first time in their history, the Vorlian chose retreat over combat. Their fleet began to move away, leaving their sworn enemies, the Zorzan, behind. Vorik saw this and bared his fangs in rage. Cowards, he snarled. You think running will save you? The Dominion does not fear a single warship. We will tear it apart. But before his words even finished, his command ship's power flickered. The lights dimmed. The holographic displays distorted. And then, every single warship in the Zorzan fleet powered down. Total blackout. The ghost fleet awakens. In the darkness, something stirred. It began as a faint glow. A ripple in space itself. Then, all at once, hundreds of identical warships emerged from the void, silent as specters. Each one identical to the first. Each one massive, sleek, and terrifyingly still. An entire hidden fleet. Vorik could hear his own breathing now. The Zorzan were the mightiest warriors in the galaxy. They had conquered planets, wiped out civilizations. Yet in this moment, he felt small. The fleet did not communicate. It did not explain. It only waited. And then, once again, that voice. You have been warned. The desperate retreat. Vorix's mind screamed at him. Every instinct, every shred of his warrior pride told him to fight. But the rational part of him, the part that had seen entire fleets disappear before his eyes, knew the truth. They had already lost. All ships, fall back. Now. The Zorzan fleet broke formation, turning, fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. The Vorlian collective had already jumped to hyperspace, abandoning their entire war effort in favor of escape. As Vorix's flagship prepared to make the jump, he took one last look at the human fleet. They did not chase. They did not fire a single shot. They simply watched. Waiting. Final twist, humanity was never weak. As the Zorzan flagship entered hyperspace, a single data packet arrived in Vorix's system. A file. Encrypted. Ancient. As it auto-decrypted, a single video feed played on his bridge. A recording from centuries ago. A war no one remembered. A war humanity never forgot. And in that final moment, as Vorix's ship disappeared into the safety of hyperspace, he realized the most horrifying truth of all. Humanity had never been weak. They had been waiting. A nightmare resurfaces. Commander Vorix stood frozen as the ancient video file played before him, projected in eerie flickering light across the dimmed bridge. His warriors, hardened Zorzan elites, watched in stunned silence. None of them had ever seen these records before. Because they were never meant to be seen. The footage was grainy, distorted, as if it had been erased and overwritten countless times, but fragments remained. And what Vorix saw made his blood run cold. Centuries ago, the First Contact War. The footage showed a planet, a thriving world, beautiful, lush, and full of life. A world that had once been called Earth. Then, the screen shifted to an invasion. Zorzan warships, sleek, unstoppable, descending from the skies, unleashing rivers of plasma fire, burning cities, erasing civilization. Vorix recognized the battle formations. This was a standard Zorzan invasion tactic. A conquest strategy they had used on countless worlds. And yet, something was wrong. The footage did not show victory. It showed a massacre, but not of humans. It showed Zorzen warships falling from the sky, their hulls corroded, ruptured from the inside. It showed Zorzen soldiers screaming, their weapons malfunctioning, their battle armor warping as if something invisible was eating through it. It showed entire fleets vanishing, their commanders' last words lost in static. They're not dying. Weapons ineffective. It's a trap. And then, the final image. A single human standing in the ruins of a battlefield, his face covered in soot and blood, staring up at the Zorzen warships with utter defiance. A voiceover, from what must have been a desperate Zorzen transmission. Do not engage. Do not return to this planet. Forget that humans exist. And then, the feed cut out. Silence filled the bridge. The erased history. Vorik staggered back, gripping the console to steady himself. This isn't possible. One of his officers, pale beneath his scaled skin, whispered, "We invaded Earth." The second in command, shaking, nodded. Centuries ago. But we have no records of it. Because, Vorik rasped, we were never supposed to remember. They hadn't just lost. They had been forced to erase all knowledge of the war. The Zorzen Dominion, the most feared warriors in the galaxy, had once tried to conquer Earth. And something happened that terrified them so much that they wiped out all records of humanity. The missing pieces. Vorik turned back to the human warship, still floating silently in space, still watching. "What are they?" he whispered. The Vorlian Collective, now safely out of range, sent a new transmission across the galaxy. Analysis complete. Probability of human extinction, 0%. Probability of total galactic extinction, 87%. The warning spread like wildfire. Every empire. Every ruler. Every species in the galaxy. For centuries, they had believed humanity was weak. Now, they understood the truth. Humanity had never been conquered. They had simply been waiting. And now, the war that the galaxy had tried to forget, was about to begin again. Across the stars, the warning spread. The Zorzen Dominion and the Vorlian Collective, once locked in a brutal war, had ceased all hostilities. Their fleets were in full retreat, abandoning strategic sectors, scrambling for safe territory. Entire planetary defense grids were going online, preparing for the worst. But against what? Humanity had one ship. One ghostly, silent warship that had spoken only once. You have trespassed into human space. Leave now, or face extinction. That should have been a bluff. And yet, two entire empires were running. The rest of the galaxy wanted answers. Inside the warship, a technology beyond comprehension. The warship remained motionless, watching. The Zorzen had tried to scan it before, and failed. But now, across the galaxy, brilliant minds were pooling resources, attempting to decipher what made this vessel so terrifying. Their findings made no sense. No energy signature detected. No known propulsion systems. No internal crew readings. Yet, it moved. And then, one horrifying realization surfaced. The ship wasn't made of metal. It was grown. The very hull of the ship was alive, constantly shifting, regenerating. It was as if humanity had found a way to merge biological warfare with starship engineering, a living war machine. And its weapons? Unknown. Every species in the galaxy had developed weapons based on the same fundamental laws of physics: plasma, antimatter, railguns, quantum torpedoes. Humanity's weapons didn't register on any scale. The warship's single presence had rendered an entire fleet powerless. What kind of war had humanity fought to develop this? The unspoken rule of the galaxy. For thousands of years, the great galactic empires had existed under one universal law. Advanced civilizations do not fear primitive ones. New species were either absorbed, conquered, or left alone to develop on their own. But humanity was different. Humanity had never asked to join the galactic stage. They had never tried to expand beyond their home system. Instead, they had done something far more terrifying. They had waited. In silence. For centuries. And now, they had emerged, not as prey, but as predators. The galaxy's greatest mistake. Deep within the Zorzan archives, Supreme Commander Orcs and his scientists continued searching for more lost data. Then, one of the lead analysts gasped. "Commander, we just uncovered a second message." Orcs turned sharply. "A second message? From whom?" The scientist swallowed hard. "From us." Orcs's claws tightened around the edge of the console as a newly decrypted transmission played. A message, sent centuries ago. It was an emergency distress signal, sent from a long-forgotten Zorzan invasion fleet. Their final transmission. A deep, panicked voice came through the static. "They don't stop. We've tried everything. They keep adapting. They keep changing. Our weapons have no effect. By the time we counter one, they've already made something worse. They are not fighting to survive. They are fighting to learn. Do not engage. Do not return. Do not wake them up." And then, silence. Orcs stood frozen, his warriors staring in stunned horror. This wasn't just an old battle report. It was a warning. A warning they had buried and ignored. And now, humanity was awake again. The terrifying truth about humanity. The warship had not fired a single shot. It had not moved aggressively. And yet, it had already won. Because it wasn't here to fight a battle. It was here to send a message. The galaxy forgot humanity. But humanity never forgot the galaxy. The greatest empires of the stars had pushed humanity aside, believing them to be too weak to matter. But instead of dying out, humanity had done something no other species had ever done before. They had spent centuries evolving their war machines, perfecting them, experimenting, waiting. And now, they had returned. They had waited long enough. A desperate call to arms. Panic spread like wildfire across the galaxy. The Zorzan Dominion, the Vorlian Collective, and a dozen other major factions had spent centuries waging war against each other, but now, for the first time in history, they united against a common enemy. Humanity. War councils convened across multiple homeworlds, and the verdict was unanimous. The human warship must be destroyed. Humanity must never be allowed to rise again. Within hours, the largest coalition fleet in galactic history was assembled. Thousands of warships, from the most advanced races in existence, gathered on the edge of deep space. Their target? The silent, waiting ghost fleet of humanity. The largest fleet ever assembled. Supreme Commander Orcs stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the colossal armada displayed before him. It was a force so large that no species had ever dared attempt such an assault before. Over 20,000 warships. Millions of soldiers. The most advanced weapons in the galaxy. This fleet could annihilate entire planets in a matter of minutes. There was no way a single human warship, no matter how terrifying, could stand against it. And yet, Orcs felt no sense of victory. Only fear. The human warship remained unmoved, unfazed, as if it had expected this. First contact, the attack begins. All ships, fire at will. The galaxy's greatest fleet unleashed hell. A tsunami of plasma torpedoes, antimatter missiles, and hyper-accelerated railgun slugs erupted from the coalition armada, all converging on one target. The human warship. The vacuum of space lit up like a dying star, a violent explosion so massive that entire planets thousands of light-years away would register the energy signature. The force of the blast tore through the void, creating waves of radiation so intense they distorted space itself. Nothing could survive that. No warship. No species. Nothing. The moment the galaxy lost hope. And yet, as the fire and destruction cleared, the human warship was still there. Untouched. Unharmed. And worst of all, it had not even activated its shields. Impossible, Orcs whispered. It didn't even try to defend itself. How? A slow, eerie hum began vibrating through the fleet. The human warship had done nothing to retaliate. But now, something else was coming. The ghost fleet awakens. From the depths of space, new signals emerged. First dozens. Then hundreds. Then, thousands. The blackness of space shifted and twisted as more human warships uncloaked, each one as massive, as silent, and as terrifying as the first. A fleet that should not exist. A fleet that had been waiting in the shadows for centuries. A fleet of nightmares. Commander, an officer choked. We're not facing one warship. We're facing an entire fleet. Panic rippled through the coalition. This is a trap. Fall back. We were never meant to win this fight. And then, the human warship finally moved. The weapons of humanity. For the first time in history, the galaxy witnessed what human warfare looked like. The Ghost Fleet began their attack. But they didn't fire plasma. They didn't use railguns, torpedoes, or antimatter. No one understood what was happening. Because the moment the human warships fired, enemy ships simply vanished. No wreckage. No debris. No survivors. Just gone. The end of the battle before it began. The most powerful fleet in galactic history was being erased from existence, one warship at a time. Nothing in the galaxy had ever countered human weapons before, because these weapons had never been seen before. This wasn't war. This was annihilation. And as the battle raged on, the coalition fleet shattered, ships retreating in blind terror, realizing far too late. They had walked straight into humanity's trap. The final message. Orcs's flagship was the last remaining Zorzan vessel. His fleet was gone. And the human warship was still there. Still watching. Still waiting. Then, that deep, distorted voice returned. We warned you. You chose war. Now you will remember. And then, darkness. The human warship vanished, along with its fleet. Leaving behind a broken, terrified galaxy. A broken galaxy. The battle had lasted less than an hour. And yet, in that time, the greatest fleet in galactic history had been reduced to nothing. Millions of soldiers, the most advanced warships ever constructed, entire civilizations, all wiped out in silence. And then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the human warships were gone. No conquest. No demands. No declaration of victory. Just silence. The survivors, what little remained of the coalition fleet, drifted aimlessly through space, broken and defeated. Their greatest mistake had not been underestimating humanity. It had been forcing humanity to act. The questions no one could answer. Across the remaining empires, panic consumed entire worlds. Why did the humans leave? What was their true purpose? Why didn't they finish the war? For the first time in galactic history, there were no rulers. No empire dared claim leadership. Because in the face of true power, all of their wars, their ambitions, their centuries of dominance meant nothing. They had seen what lay beyond the abyss. And they had barely survived. Vorix faces the truth. Supreme Commander Vorix stood on the damaged bridge of his crippled flagship. The screens flickered, warning of failing life support systems, damaged engines, and a disabled weapons array. It didn't matter. He wasn't thinking about the battle. He was thinking about what the human warship had said. You chose war. Now you will remember. Not, now you will die. Not, now you will suffer. But, you will remember. What did that mean? The final transmission. A low chime echoed through the bridge, an incoming transmission. Vorix flinched, his claws tensing. Was this a final warning from the humans? The crew hesitated before patching it through. And then, a hologram appeared. Not of a warship. Not of an emperor. Not of a human general. But of an old man. A human, aged, scarred, wearing simple, worn clothing. He stood in silence for a moment, then, he spoke. I am Admiral Elias Carter. I was born long after your people first came to our world. Long after you tried to erase us. His voice was calm. Steady. But his eyes burned with the weight of centuries. You wanted to forget us. You tried to erase what you did. We let you. Vorix's breath caught in his throat. But we never forgot you. We waited. We prepared. Because we knew, one day, you would come again. The purpose of the warship. Admiral Carter exhaled, his expression softening, not with hatred, but with something even more chilling. Pity. You never feared us before. Now, you do. And that is enough. Vorix's claws dug into the metal of the console. Why, he rasped. Why did you leave? The Admiral tilted his head, as if the answer should have been obvious. Because we don't want your worlds. We don't need your resources. We don't desire your destruction. The old man's voice grew heavier, carrying an unspoken warning. All we ever wanted, was for you to leave us alone. The realization that broke the galaxy. For the first time, Vorix truly understood. Humanity had not declared war. They had not conquered the galaxy. They had done something far worse. They had made the galaxy afraid of them. They had ensured that no empire, no ruler, no warlord would ever dare approach Earth again. Not because they were weak. Not because they were peaceful. But because if anyone ever threatened humanity again, the warship would return. And next time, they would not leave. The final words of humanity. The hologram flickered. Admiral Carter's voice turned distant, quiet. We are not your enemy. We never were. But now, you understand. His eyes met Vorix's one last time. Stay in your space. We will stay in ours. But if you come for us again. The old man's expression darkened. We won't just make you remember. We will make sure no one remembers you. And then, with a final flicker, the transmission ended. And humanity was gone. The silence that followed. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy stood still. There were no wars. No battles. No conquests. The great empires that had once fought endlessly for dominance now cowered in their own sectors, unwilling to risk provoking the force that had shattered them. Humanity's message had been clear. And the galaxy had listened. The Zorzan Dominion, the Vorlian Collective, and every surviving species knew one undeniable truth. Humanity had spared them. This time. Vorix's final report. Supreme Commander Vorix sat alone in his quarters, staring at the decrypted files on his screen. Every fact, every recorded event of the First Contact War had been wiped from their history. The leaders of his own empire had buried the truth in fear. And now, that truth had returned to haunt them. The human warship had never been a weapon of conquest. It had been a reminder. We let you forget us once. We will never let you forget us again. The galaxy had treated humanity as nothing. And so, humanity had become everything they feared. Vorix clenched his fists. He had spent his life as a warrior, believing in the strength of his people. And now, he understood the greatest mistake of his species. They had thought war was about strength. But humanity had fought a war of patience. They had outlasted. They had learned. They had waited. And in doing so, they had won without needing to rule. The unspoken agreement. Across the galaxy, the surviving empires issued new orders. All exploration vessels are to avoid soul space. No fleets are to approach human territory. All records of Earth are to remain untouched. No official treaty was signed. No peace agreement was written. But it didn't need to be. The fear of extinction had done what diplomacy never could. The galaxy had entered an unspoken era of peace, not because they had found common ground, but because they had found something greater to fear. And as long as humanity remained silent, they would never take the risk again. The legends begin. Decades passed. And as time went on, stories of the human warship became legend. There were those who believed the fleet had been a ghost story, an illusion designed to scare the empires into submission. There were others who whispered of a hidden army of human warships, waiting in the deep void beyond the galactic rim. And then, there were those who asked the most terrifying question of all. If humanity developed weapons that could erase entire fleets in an instant, what had they been fighting against to create such technology? No one knew. And no one dared to find out. Humanity's true strength. Vorix, now older and weary, looked out at the stars from his private chamber. The galaxy had survived, but it had changed forever. He had spent his entire life believing in military dominance, conquest, and power. But the greatest power in the universe had never been weapons or armies. It had been understanding when to wait. Strength is not about fighting every battle. Strength is about knowing when a battle is already won. Humanity had not fought for control. They had not fought for revenge. They had fought for memory. And now, the galaxy would never forget them again. Ever. Final scene, Earth watches from the shadows. On a quiet blue planet, beneath the warm glow of a familiar sun, a group of scientists and military officials silently observed the galaxy. They saw the panic. They saw the fear. And most importantly, they saw that the message had been received. A lone admiral, aged and wise, watched the stars from a high-orbit station. A younger officer stood beside him, hesitant. "Sir, do you think they'll ever come back?" The admiral smiled faintly, eyes filled with centuries of history. "They might. But they won't come for war. They'll come because they'll finally understand the lesson we gave them." The officer frowned. "And what lesson is that?" The admiral's gaze drifted to the stars, his voice soft. "Never mistake silence for weakness. And never assume the quiet ones aren't watching." The camera panned upward, showing the vast darkness of space. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the galaxy's greatest empires still trembled. And deep in the void, humanity watched. Waiting. Rocket final message. The greatest battles are not won through conquest, but through patience, knowledge, and the power of memory. Humanity had not defeated the galaxy. They had taught it to fear. And in doing so, they had ensured peace, without ever needing to rule. For as long as the stars burned, the universe would never forget the day humanity returned. Because the universe would never forget what it had almost lost.